the mix. We love it all. So we started this journey this month on defining and getting clear exactly what vulnerability is, what it isn't, and why it is important. We've looked at how often fear, whether it be fear of rejection, fear of being judged, fear is what stops us from truly being vulnerable. And yet, we must allow that vulnerability led by love to remember our wholeness and let love lead the way, to open our hearts to truly be seen, to know who we are, what we're feeling, and allow ourselves the depth of the experience that comes by embracing vulnerability. We talked about how we have to let go of that armor that stops us from being vulnerable in order to let in all that is seeking to be revealed and transformed, not only in our individual life, but also in the collective consciousness. We must embrace the practice of self-reflection, self-awareness, and what I called last week a compassionate curiosity, being willing to look within, but from a place of love and compassion, to discover what is really going on beyond or below the surface of our exterior lives. So beyond and below what we say and what we do and these kind of habitual patterns of behavior that we have, there is often a belief that is holding us back and informing those behaviors that are not so ideal. So once we can do that work to discover what is actually motivating our words and our actions, that is where the gift of true transformation lies, where we can stand in our power and truth and our wholeness and let that lead the way. So today we're going to continue this exploration by looking at the power and possibility that vulnerability brings to us, again, not only in our own lives, but for our community at large, for the world, and the collective consciousness of all of humanity. What is possible when we allow ourselves to truly see and be seen. And what I know is that this is one of our most basic needs and desires, right? How many times have you said, either out loud or in your head, I just want to be seen, right? Why can't they see me? Or I want to be heard, I want to be known, I want to be understood. So in order to truly be seen, that which we desire, it does take a willingness to show up and be seen. If we want to be seen, we have to be willing to be seen. It sounds simple, but it's so complex because that's where we must embrace true vulnerability as that catalyst for connection and expansion and growth and transformation. Through this possibility of a radical shift in our culture and our society. One that prioritizes authenticity and vulnerability and curiosity and love over profits and power over, right? True power inspires and connects. Power over oppresses, right? So the Centers for Spiritual Living, the organization that we are a part of, has a global vision. And I'm going to read one of the statements as a part of that. We envision all people, all beings, and all life as expressions of God. We see a world in which every person lives in alignment with their highest spiritual principle emphasizing unity with God and connection with each other. A world in which individually and collectively we are called to a higher state of consciousness and action. And just a reminder that God is just a word, so whichever word works for you, spirit, universe, life, you can apply to that statement. So we are all an expression of the one life, the one energy. And what this excerpt speaks to is the collective power and possibility that is brought about when we practice vulnerability. The science of mind teaches us that when we activate the creative nature of life through this process called the creative process, that life itself begins to express more fully through us. That this activation opens the door to infinite possibilities, to new opportunities for the collective evolution of consciousness. So what that means is we don't have to keep doing things the way they've always been done. Thank goodness, right? Whew. Instead, we are able to tap into this field of pure potentiality and create a new way of being and doing life, a new way of being and doing and creating society. You know, when I look back at old TV shows, how many of you have had this experience? You're like, oh, I love this show. And then it's like you go to watch it again, or in my case, like show your daughter, and all of a sudden you're like, ooh, you begin to cringe at the racism and the ableist language and all these things that were commonplace during that time. But from today's awareness are no longer acceptable and, no longer at the vibration in which we are and what we know and understand as a collective today. And, things that used to be funny were often jokes told by people in a certain position of power or privilege at the expense of oppressed communities. So that is, to me, an example of this collective evolution. So lest you ever think like, what is going on, right? Are we ever going to change? Whether it be in the collective or in your own life. If you actually take a moment and pause, look back and take stock at all of those little shifts along the way, you will see the greater trajectory of this evolution of consciousness that is always bending towards justice and equality and love and peace and oneness and wholeness, kindness. All of these things that we know are the true reality. We just have to get out of our own way. So what we know is that life is always evolving and will continue to evolve. So have us not be stuck in the what is, but always be open to what is to come. The global vision calls us to expand our view of what is possible, recognizing, again, the role of vulnerability, that vulnerability is that key ingredient in creating a world that works for everyone. So what is our part in this collective evolution? Well, we must first start by being willing to look within, to investigate our own interior worlds, to get to know ourselves in a more deeper and vulnerable way through self-reflection, mindfulness exercises, self-awareness, that which we talked about last week, really noticing, okay, why am I saying this? Why am I doing this? Is it by default? Because often our default responses, or reactions rather, our default reactions come from a place of fear, not good enough, judgment, attack, defend, right? But being willing to slow down a minute, take a breath, then we can choose to respond and practice taking responsibility for our own lives, our own words, our own actions. 100% responsibility, no more and no less. Sometimes this means being vulnerable enough to say, wow, I really messed up there, right? To acknowledge, I'm sorry, or I understand my words and actions had a negative impact on you. I could have said that better or differently, right? I'll do better. I'm going to do better, right? So that level of vulnerability, first of all, we have to recognize within ourselves to embrace our own imperfections without judging ourselves and going on a whole spiral shame, but to recognize that we are human and we will make mistakes. So to recognize that within ourselves, it's a whole lot easier to be able to make amends, to be accountable and apologize for our actions when we have done our own work so that we're not coming from a place of shame. When we can recognize, oh, yeah, that wasn't my best moment. Compassionate curiosity. And then take the steps to make amends. Not from a place of, oh, I'm so bad. Why do you even love me? Oh, you should just leave me, So this work, again, we get to practice in relationship with others, but it calls us to a deeper vulnerability within ourselves. And then we can see a wider view of how exactly our words and actions impact others in the world around us, which then allows us to experience more connection and belonging, and to bolster that sense of connection and belonging within our own relationships and communities. So this takes a willingness to see ourselves, to know ourselves, to be compassionate with ourselves. And then the next step is to see others, to truly see others without all of the filters that we have, without all of the judgment of who we think they should be, of how we think they should show up. But instead, it requires us to see others with present moment eyes. What do we mean by that? Seeing people not as we would like them to be, but actually for who they are. And these eyes don't see with the lens of judgment or comparison. Present moment eyes see with the clarity of pure awareness. Being able to see others with our real eyes allows us to realize the truth of who they are. Just like us, everyone is a unique expression of the one. So knowing our truth, we can see that reflected with everyone, seeing with our real eyes, to be vulnerable enough to drop our defenses and see how someone is showing up before you right here, right now. Right? We see this often when we maybe go back home or with certain friends or family for the holidays that we haven't seen in a while. And all of a sudden, they're seeing us as the same way they saw us 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But what we know about the nature of life is that we're always growing and expanding, so we're a whole new me. So how can we show up vulnerable enough to let the world around us see this whole new me and to be willing to see them differently as well? Being vulnerable not only requires knowing ourselves without all of these layers of judgments, but also being willing to see others as if meeting them for the first time. This is sometimes a little like kind of trick I do on my mind when I'm feeling particularly stuck in a relationship or with someone I'm close with, and you notice those same patterns. You're like, oh, we've had the same conversation over and over and over. I take a breath and I'm like, okay, imagine I am meeting this person for the first time. Imagine if this beloved before me were to walk into Ahava for the first time. How would I greet them and see them? And that little trick in my mind allows me to shift out of all that I've known and experienced with these various people in my life and be willing to see them with new eyes. Right? And again, it's one of those things that if someone shows you who they are, we give them a chance. We give them a chance. But if they keep showing you who they are and you see them with fresh eyes and they keep showing you who they are, that's a different story. You know what I mean? I don't want to enable a type of toxic or unhealthy relationship. But I'm talking about how we can often project our own shame and judgment and blame on someone else when their purest intention is simply to be seen and to love. So where in those moments can we clean off those glasses and see anew and realize the truth of this beautiful light that is before us? And it is only when we can practice seeing others in this way that we can begin to create a whole community that is a brave and safe space where we are all invited to show up authentically in our messiness and all. And then through this lens of pure awareness, we can create an energy and a vibration of acceptance, of honoring, of respect, which then creates the space for more and deeper connection and vulnerability. It's like a ripple effect that spreads out into our community. Years ago, when I lived in Chicago, I would take the train, the L, it's called, the Red Line, into work and other places downtown. And one day I was on the train, and it happened to be a Cubs game. It just let out, so all of a sudden it was like, whoo, bombarded with folks in a very certain state of mind and enthusiasm. And there was this young adult sitting across from me that, their energy was very kind of this, I can't think of the words, but you know what I mean. And they were doing the Rubik's Cube, and they were brilliant at this Rubik's Cube, right? I don't know, but I've never been able to do a Rubik's Cube. It's not the way my brain works. But they were just like, so I just sat there kind of observing, and what I noticed is this, young, very, gregarious young guy's like, hey, and like notices this person do this. That's so cool, and starts engaging with her, and all of a sudden her energy is like, she sits up, and she is like, that moment of I'm seen. And somebody, most likely in any other environment, like I picture this guy, like at a fraternity party, and this person, sitting in their dorm room doing a Rubik's Cube. But all of a sudden, we're all meshed in this train together, and there's this moment of connection. And then other people start and then they start like, yeah, and engaging and in showing this talent that they have. And I was just so struck by that moment. The vulnerability it took for, first of all, the person to engage when they are seen, and then of the person to interact, to say the first thing, to acknowledge. And then the energy that spread throughout that whole cart where this person got to really be seen and highlighted. So the interesting thing about vulnerability is that when we allow ourselves to be seen, we invite others to do the same. We can find beautiful ways to create community and to nurture vulnerability, connection, and belonging by sharing of ourselves and by noticing and acknowledging when someone shares. So this brings me to this past Thursday night. We had our open mic talent show, and y'all, we have some talent. It was so amazing. So I just want to take another minute. If you performed that night and you're in this room, will you please stand? We got Mike, we got Bernadette, we got Tina, we got Lisa in the booth. Give them some love. Yes. It takes courage. It takes courage to share yourself in that way, especially when it's something as intimate as a creative process, right? Of something creative, a talent, a gift that you have, that no matter, how appreciated you may be or how known you may be in the world, folks still get nervous. We were talking about that a little bit that night, Kim was here, and Kim sings regularly. She's like, I'm still nervous, even though I'm up here, once a month. Tina, too. It's like, yeah, Heather's like, yeah, I still get nervous. So I just wanted to honor the courage and the bravery that it took. And now I feel like I see and know each of you in a much more intimate way. You share parts of your story. You shared your heart, your creativity. You were willing to be seen. And those of us in the room were willing to see with our real eyes. So that's what it's all about, y'all. And I know there's been talk of, we got to do it again. So I'm sure we'll do it again. And we will fill the room because it is a powerful experience. So vulnerability makes space for us to try. Sometimes we miss the mark. Sometimes we nail it. But we get to reflect back and then try again and keep moving forward in our own personal growth. I heard on a podcast with Brene Brown about when she was speaking at the big TED Talk. There's the little ones and then there's the big TED Talk. And she was saying how one thing that she got up and it just kind of came out of her mouth and she didn't mean to say it, but she was like, this is a room of failures. And then she was kind of like, oh, I hope they received that well, right? But what she meant was all her conversations in the hallways and in between thing, everyone was like, yeah, well, I tried this and this company failed, so then I did this, and well, now I'm trying this new thing, and well, back when I was here, everyone not only were failures and tried again, but knew that that's what it took, so they were not ashamed to talk about it. They talked about it openly, the vulnerability to be like, well, yeah, no, I'm not with that company anymore. That tanked and lost $1 million, but, I'm doing this now, and this is happening. And she's like, and these are like, top, big, amazing people. So vulnerability encourages us to fail, but to get up again and to not spiral in our own unworthiness just because one thing we did or tried did not succeed, just because 5 things we did or tried did not succeed. Because the truth is that we are all inherently whole and worthy. And there is something within us always seeking to be expressed if we allow it, if we show up fully to life, authentically, embracing vulnerability as the superpower that it is. Another aspect of vulnerability that I want to talk about, which the reading so beautifully articulated, is joy. Now, many of us may not realize the vulnerability it takes to express joy. But Brene Brown says that through her research, she shows that joy is one of the most vulnerable emotions. To be free enough to experience joy fully, to be seen in our full expression and delight of spirit through us as joy, without being afraid of when's the other shoe going to drop. How many of you may be in a moment of pure joy and then are like, oh, but this isn't going to last long, right? Which takes us out of the moment. And what the research shows us is that it is joy and the practice and the willingness to fully experience joy and gratitude that sustains us through those moments. That will happen. But to be fully alive and engaged in the joy when it is present without allowing the fear and the doubt to creep in, it's like building a muscle. And that joy muscle, that gratitude muscle will allow us to be even more resilient when those moments happen that kind of knock us off of our feet, right? The loss, the tragedy, the humanity of the world. It will happen, but that doesn't mean we can't fully express joy in our lives. You know, it's sometimes we're like, how can I feel happy right now when all this is happening? That's another way of taking ourselves out of the game. So vulnerability isn't just this one-dimensional concept, right? It requires an internal awareness and an external practice. All of these things we must practice. We must practice cultivating authenticity. Practice choosing joy. Practice gratitude. Practice vulnerability by sharing a part of ourselves with someone that we would desire to have more connection with, by sharing a part of ourselves in this beloved community where we are here to always see you with our real eyes. Ernest Holmes says, we see in each other the reflection or the manifestation of the everlasting life, and each is an individualized embodiment of it. Remember, the kingdom of heaven is already in us. We are in it. It is only as we are in harmony with it that we awake to it. That was a lot of its, but basically, love, life, spirit, all those things that you desire is who you are. You live in it, you express it. And that is what we are here to be and to show and to see, to allow to be seen and to see in each other, leading us to living a life fully actualizing our desires, standing in our authentic power, knowing that vulnerability is our superpower. And it creates a unique opportunity for new possibilities to emerge. Brene Brown says, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. So vulnerability lays this framework for us to reshape not only the narrative of our own lives, but our societal narrative, and to create space for conversations of transformation. The power of collective transformation is made possible through vulnerability. So I invite you this week to consider, what is one thing you can do to foster a greater willingness to be vulnerable in your life? What is one thing that you could say or think differently that may create that wider space for vulnerability to live, to grow, and to flourish? Knowing that to be alive is to be vulnerable, to be in relationship is vulnerable. To be in community is to be vulnerable. And power and possibility and transformation can only occur when we bring our whole selves to life. To see and be willing to be seen. Vulnerability is the bridge that takes us to fully realizing the vision of a world that works for everyone, yes? So I want to end with this quote from Mark Nepo in the Book of Awakening. The sweetness of living comes to us when the very humanness we regret and try to hide, our seeming flaws and shameful secrets, are worked by time and nature into a honey all their own. Love that. So let us now take this into prayer. Breathing and letting go. Breathing in and letting go. How good it is to recognize the one life, this energy, this presence, this power that is love, that is freedom, that is wholeness, that is the very essence and nature of all. To recognize that this thing called life, God, Spirit, the universe, is pure, divine love, wholeness, power, freedom, and knowing that there is only one energy, one life, one power, one presence, I know that this is the very essence and nature of who I am. So I stand in this awareness of oneness, allowing this truth to wash over me, to be fully embodied, allowing creativity and freedom and love and wholeness to be activated in all aspects of my life. I know that I am one with the one. That my physical body, my spiritual body, my mental body, my energetic field are permeated with this wholeness, with this love, creativity, joy. So today I choose to see with my real eyes, to realize right here, right now, that this one thing called life is having its way in, as, and through me. So I am willing to show up, to be seen for the truth of who I am, to be known for the love that I am, to be deeply heard and understood as the one life expressing uniquely through me as it only can as me, showing up as this divine creative expression of the one life. I choose today to be seen. I choose today to let love lead the way. I choose today to know the truth of who I am. I am whole, I am perfect, I am complete, I am worthy, I am creative, I am love itself. I am free. And I embrace vulnerability and authenticity in all areas of my life. Knowing what is mine to say and do in each moment, I walk through the world with clarity and discernment, able to respond with love, to show up as the very essence and nature of who I am. And I choose this day to walk through my life and world seeing this in each and every beloved that I meet. To know and trust that everyone is doing the best that they can, and so I see with clarity from a place of pure awareness the beauty and the love and the humanity of each and every being that I meet. So grateful to have this awareness, to know that I can choose. And when I stumble, I can embrace compassion. I can choose empathy and love. And know that I am whole, I am worthy, I am loved, I am lovable, I am loving. And to continue to show up with the fullness of pure potentiality expressing through me in each and every moment, choosing again, choosing anew, choosing love, choosing freedom, choosing peace. And it is with great gratitude that I accept the fulfillment of this word. And I let go and release it into the law that always says yes. Yes, 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 my beloved, it is done. It is done. And so it is.